Right. 28 to North Carolina for me. Find the registered owner. David Frank Young, -5173.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's 10:30. Do a roll call, please.
Patrick Updike, Sandy Black, Marty Smith,
Here.
Tom Lampy,
Here.
John Benson, Bob Von Wolfrat,
Present on the phone.
Denise Pavlik, Andy Buffington,
Present on the phone.
Ellen Hagan, David Ness,
Here.
Jason Leonard,
Here.
Rob Rotter,
Here.
Michael Casper,
Present.
Carol Lund Smith, and Larry Smith.
Here.
Do we have a quorum?
What's that?
Do we have a quorum?
Jeff Swearingen is on the phone. Didn't hear my name called.
Now we do.
We have 11.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Introduction of board members, starting with those that are on the phone, please.
Jeff Swearingen.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Jeff Swearingen, Department of Natural Resources.
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Bob Von Wolfrat, State CIO.
Okay, starting down where we at. Sheriff, go ahead, start down there.
Yeah, Rob Rotter, Iowa County Sheriff, just representing sheriffs.
Mike Casper, Lynn County Sheriff's Office.
Marty Smith, Iowa Department of Public Health.
Chris Myers on the SWIC.
Tom Lampy, DPS.
Jason Leonard, Waverly Police Department.
Larry Smith, Kika County Emergency Management.
Dave Ness, Des Moines Police.
Hey, welcome everybody. I'm looking for the approval of today's agenda. If I could get a motion for that, please.
So moved.
Dave Ness, do you have a second?
Second.
Jason, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Looking for the approval of the meeting minutes from October 11th, 2018. If I get a motion for that, please.
Casper moves.
That? I'm black. Okay. Got a second?
Who did you have make the first?
I'll go with you. Okay, second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. SWIC report.
Thank you, Chair Lampy. A couple of housekeeping items. Follow up from last month when the board approved that encryption white paper and ended up taking it down to the TIA TR8 meetings and the P25 user needs. Had a lot of discussion on the paper while we were down there, some debate as well. Overall, the paper was pretty well received. The chair of the P25 user needs committee was very much in favor for some of the efforts that were put forth in drafting that paper and the information that was being shared in the paper and the recommendations of that paper. And so I think that that reflects very well on the committee work that was done with that and the contributions from members from all sides of the spectrum, both technical and operationally focused people. So kudos again to everybody and all their hard work with that. That will probably end up being moved forward to some other committees for review, and then hopefully some projects will get started within either TR8.3, which is the encryption group within TIA, or possibly the encryption task group, which is under another acronym called APIC. So that is an update on that. Things are going fairly well, and we're going to continue to work on follow-up with that and, for any work that has to go forward at the federal level. Following along the lines of encryption, I got word from NLEC yesterday. NLEC is the National Law Enforcement Communications Center. They're tasked with managing basically where people put keys in radios to try to make sure that you don't have a situation where someone shows up with a key in a radio, but it's in a spot that prevents them from talking with someone else. This is especially important if you've got people coming in from the outside or your people are going somewhere else. We got 3 numbers for those storage locations within radios yesterday, so those are now ours. The storage location numbers that we got are 786, 787, and 788. I plan on coordinating that with the various vendors across Iowa so that as radios are programmed to access the system, that they can start working that into what they do. And we have some things to work on now within some of our committees as far as, with the potential for deployment of encrypted interoperable talk groups within a year or so. Do we still want to keep the same designation we had with those where the last one is law enforcement use only? And if we do that, we would have to go through the process saying this SLN, this storage location number, is dedicated to that talk group for this type of personnel for use out in the field. So those are some discussions that we'll have to undertake at the committee level over the next several months, but that should be a relatively easy thing to get through. One other thing that I've been working on this month is working to get Holly Davidson, our new assistant, trained. She's coming along very nicely with how she's picking up on what the board's responsibilities are and what our monthly workload consists of. So work is going well with that. Work is ongoing with neighboring states as well for interstate interoperability. I was in Albert Lee, I think a week and a half or so ago, to discuss interstate interoperability with Minnesota stakeholders. There were people from Minnesota and Iowa present. Meeting was very productive. I think we learned a lot about how each state tends to operate, both at the high up state level and for the counties that were there, the local level. So we're going to take some of that information and start working on processes to make that happen. Meetings are being planned with other states as well to have similar discussions. The one thing that I did notice during those meetings, though, was that while we had appropriate representation of law enforcement there and in some instances fire, we were missing enough representation from what I view as key components. Number one, the communication centers, and number two, a COMT that would basically be able to offer some insight as to whether the technical solutions that were being proposed at those meetings are viable, feasible, and cost effective. There was a vendor that was in attendance, but then again, I really want to see if we could get a COMT present at the next group of meetings, either to attend in person or to call in and attend remotely. I have worked with state radio. Robbie Johansson has loosely committed to attend the next one as well, so that we can start getting some of the communication centers involved in those types of discussions as well with interstate interoperability. So we are making progress with that. One other meeting that we have going on tomorrow that I'm working on now as well is working on kind of taking something other states have done with their networks as far as a quick and easy way to convey to everybody who's in a communications center what talk group resources are available so that if an event does happen where interoperability is required, they immediately know what's available for use. Minnesota has a program that they call Status Board. We're going to have some meetings over the next couple of weeks to try to see if we can adapt what they've done to what our user base would be consisting of, and then also how we want to use it going down the road as well. So I'm expecting those discussions to happen fairly routinely over the next couple of months and work on a deployment strategy for us with regards to that. Finally, I will be attending a joint National Council of SWCS and SAFECOM meeting in early December. That's not going to cost the board any money since that is federal invitational travel, but any information I learn from those groups as we discuss issues that other states are facing, I will bring back here as well. So I will conclude my report with that and take any questions.
Chris, we got an email about the TIA expenses.
Yeah.
Could you brief the board on what we received?
So my understanding is that some of the TIA membership fees have gone up for the vendor members. I believe the cost went up to, I think it was $5,000 yearly for the vendors. And last email I had from some government entities that are also part of TIA is that number may be incorrect for them. So there's some clarification that would need to be done on what the actual fee to maintain membership would be within TIA. My understanding is that in the past, the government fees have been substantially less than what the vendors paid to be a part of that. So
We approved a certain amount for, at the time Craig introduced that. So we just need to know if the cost is going up, we need to run that through the finance committee, whatever number that's going to be.
I will get clarification what that price is and run that through finance next month.
Okay. Thank you.
Chris, I've got one quick question here. On encryption, has there been any conversations with the fire marshal's office to be able to have them in an encryption state as well?
I have not had any of those discussions myself. That's kind of in their wheelhouse of what they want to do for operability. I'm not necessarily aware of any of their plans as far as how they are going to deploy their fleet map or talk groups, but those are certainly conversations that can be had with outside groups that would have an interest in interoperating with them.
Okay, because I feel personally that they should be included possibly in some of the encryption process.
Okay.
For their operability.
I will reach out. We had, within the discussions we had within that subcommittee, we did have representation from D&E and DCI on there, so fire marshals may make sense as well if they have personnel available.
Are you talking encryption on interop or encryption on their own ops, and then they're going to share with someone?
Say, my thought process, so if a local fire chief needs to talk to an investigator of either while en route or somehow how that handshake can go to make it as seamless. So if while the investigator's en route to a scene, that he can get some update or detail.
I would think the easiest way to do it would be to just have the fire marshal share their key with whoever they work with the most, versus the interop stuff is a whole nother ball game we're talking for encrypting some of those.
So as we evolve in this, that will be a suggestion that.
Sure. Because D&E has zones and talk groups. Fire marshal's got it all set in their radios. I'm sure they're asking for some type of encryption. I know D&E for sure is. I can find out faster and get some answers.
All right, we just want to make sure we're not leaving them behind.
Yep.
Great, thanks.
Okay, 911 council report. I believe the sheriff is handling that today.
You bet. Probably the most significant thing that we did today was we finalized a policy dealing with the fund that was established with using 911 operating surplus funds. It was a $100,000 fund that covers council travel, public education, and training, and that is in that order of priority. One of the things that has come up is whether the $100,000 is covering us. Originally, this money was almost difficult to give away, and now we have people fighting over it. And especially on the training, the localized training, that has really become very, very popular. And so the $100,000 is actually a product of 34A. And as you might know, the council has formed a committee to look at 34A and see what changes might be necessary to make 34A work a little bit better. But anyway, that's one of the issues that will certainly be talked about as far as that $100,000 amount goes. We just basically tweaked the policy to make it a little more understandable for people and hit a few subjects that were a little bit unclear. But the priority on the council travel is first, and then the public education, the guidelines for that would be, the public education that you'd be asking money for would have to have a statewide focus, and it would also pay for the statewide 911 website. And then secondary consideration would be given towards public education projects within a region or a multi-county scope. The training sessions, which is really what's kept us busy, the criteria for that is the training sessions must be include multiple PSAPs. It must be over and above normal dispatcher training. We don't want to be in the business of training dispatchers for their primary roles. This is above and beyond training. And so in order to get that money, you have to make it multiple PSAP. It must be attended by at least 10 students from Iowa. We do allow for there to be out-of-state students, but the criteria for that is if there is a cap to any training, that the Iowa students are first, and if there's any room after that cap, we would accept out-of-state students. And also, originally we had talked about limiting certain programs to 2 offerings, and we changed that to, say, 2 offerings per region. And the reason that came up was we had a lot of classes that were taught multiple times, and there was some concern originally that maybe we were spending too much money on a certain class, but the reality of that was that those classes were all well attended. So I think we were responding to the needs of PSAPs across the state. If we were doing the same program 4 or 5 times and no one's showing up, that's a totally different story. But when you do have good attendance, even if it is the same class, breaking it up maybe through regions is a better way to go rather than just saying 2. So that was adopted. And beyond that, that's basically it. We want to hold a 33% fund hold back for projects and opportunities as they arise. This last time, the first meeting into the fiscal year, that training money was being asked for. And so we have to be a little careful that we don't spend everything down right at the beginning of the fiscal year, not have something left over for things that pop up. So there will be that 33%. And something else that we will try to work with ILEA to work with them and make sure that they are getting what they need for those above and beyond courses that have a statewide focus, and try to coordinate with them so that we're kind of on the same page of what type of training we're offering throughout the state. The final policy will be available soon. We had just basically endorsed this policy as a council this morning, and Blake will be cleaning that up and getting us a final document. So that document will be available here rather soon. If anybody has any questions about it or needs a copy of it, certainly reach out to us. I think we'll probably put it on the website. But if anybody has any questions now or in the future, just reach out to Blake or myself or another council member. And that's all I have, if anybody has questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Moving on to the user group committee, Chair Buffington.
Yeah, thank you. The user group committee had a relatively short meeting. Other than just the normal updates, we approved 4 new users: the Delaware, Dubuque, Jackson County Regional Transit Authority at level 2, Hancock County at level 3, Jones County at 1, and the United States Army Corps of Engineers at Lake Red Rock had an updated application to level 2. So just for your a heads up for later in the agenda during new business, I will either be either removing myself from the entire vote, or just we could separate out Hancock County, since I would have a conflict of interest in approving that. But there's nothing else.
Okay, thanks. Finance Committee, Mr. Wittenweiler, do you happen to be on the phone?
I am.
Go ahead with your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. All right, thank you, Chair Lampy. The monthly net expenditures during October for the Interoperable and Broadband Communications Fund were $8,345, which leaves a ending balance for October of $242,359. In regards to SlickB 2.0, the monthly expenditures in that grant were $8,596, and of that amount, $6,876 were federal expenditures, which leaves a remaining federal amount of $153,152. And in the case of our Finance Committee meeting, we did not have any travel approvals or any other items that were discussed. So does the board have any questions regarding the activities or financial position of the Interoperable and Broadband Communication Fund or SLIGB 2.0 activity?
Don't see any.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Governance Committee, Chair Benson is not here. Is there someone covering for? Okay.
In his absence, I would normally speak up, but I was unable to make the committee meeting on Monday. So back to you, Chris, if you would.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that, that you weren't able to make that. So at the governance committee, there were 5 standards that were reviewed. 4 of them are before you today. One of them was sent back to standards for some further work and clarification and coordination on some specifics related to announcements. Otherwise, the 4 that you see under new business, item B, those will be up for approval today. And that was more or less the gist of the governance meeting, along with a standard update during that. So,
okay. Operations.
The Operations Committee actually met by phone call on the 17th of October, and it was about an hour and a half long. It was well attended. I did jump off the phone call after about 45 minutes or so. Talked about many things. Talked about the sub-regional talk groups again. Came up in discussion, and that the necessity of those. We all believe that they are necessary. I think everybody here would agree with that. Talked about other things as well. One of the things that came up later in the discussion was the fact that everybody knows that Leah is going away, but yet nothing has come from DPS to kind of tell PSAPs or the locals to say, hey, look, this is kind of the time period that we're extending this out to be, or giving them some kind of a heads up on that. So I know that it's just one of those things. Being you, the bureau chief, I can actually direct that to you. I know I didn't have to come here to the board meeting to actually ask that, but those are some of the things that we talk about during the operations committee, and that's very important to the locals and to everybody across Iowa. So we also talked about the phone call that we're going to be having in the near future on the proposed budget request increase, and trying to get ready for what operations committee can do to help out with that. So other than that, I will turn it over to Chris.
Yeah.
We had plenty of other things that we spoke about, but nothing that was that need board action. But I'll turn over to Chris as far as the grant process.
Yeah. So as of 0900 this morning, we had 63 responses for the PSAP control station grant access. So that's solid. I know I spoke with 911 program manager Blake DeRushi this morning, and he's also very pleased with the response that we've had so far. The window for PSAPs to specify what they want for equipment is tomorrow night at 23:59. And then at that point, that'll close. It looks like we'll still be able to provide PSAPs that don't have a connection with some type of equipment to accomplish that, but this will be their window of opportunity to specify what type of equipment they would want.
Chris, so other than this, was it 68 was the original that we were trying to target? So
About 70 was the original target, yes.
Okay. So obviously we know who it is that we haven't heard from yet.
Yes.
Okay. Have we made an effort to just, hey, look?
I sent out a reminder, kind of a T-1 week to go last week to the original list again. If there's a desire from the committee, I can send that out again today to let them know that we're getting close to T-minus 24 hours. But
I would just think that, with 7 or 8 that we would need to get a hold of, it'd be easy for somebody just to give them a call. Hey, have you seen this? Do you know about this? And, and I'd be willing to actually reach out to those. Those are just simple 7 phone calls to make. So obviously,
I'll probably send out the list because I don't have a running tally of those PSAPs that we know that we would need to help get access to. As far as whether or not they've responded yet, I've just been basically been keeping track of the numbers and whether or not they already do have access or not. So the amount of specifics you're looking for doesn't quite exist in paper form yet, but I could send a reminder email out this afternoon to everybody. So.
that it? Good, okay. I believe Chair Hagan's on out of the country. Sean, were you going to cover this for her today?
Morning, everyone. So updates, we rolled out the production change for the Isicsb join. We're still working with the code provider because some of it wasn't exactly designed for the way we're using it. Have no fear, we'll figure it out, but it is working. Other than that, we're waiting for our training teams to finally come back off the road since they've been out training the Isicsb across the state to start planning the next outreach. Currently, we're looking at sometime in December to figure out if we're going to go to Mason City or Burlington. We're probably going to go into Q1 2019 for the next outreach because with holidays and everything else and all the other unknown factors, it'll probably be Q1 before we finish the outreach. Other than that, we've been doing some directory updates and modifying the newsletters a little bit, working to keep AT&T in the loop with us, making sure that we get as quick feedback as possible, as well as working with Motorola as well with the Isicsb project. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. We move on to training. I don't believe Chair Pavlik's on the phone.
No, she's unable to make it.
Okay, go ahead.
Cover that. I was on the phone call. At the last training meeting, several things were discussed. They discussed feedback that we got from the regional Isicsb trainings that we had, 2 per region back in September. Some more information was exchanged there, and we are also awaiting some feedback from Tom Justin that he took as far as feedback from attendees on site. And that list was being compiled and it was going to be sent to us. So we're still awaiting that, and once that arrives, we will forward that on to the rest of the board. We are also excited to have the new OEC catalog to review. There's some discussions on what type of trainings we want to offer next year that would be OEC delivered. So one thing that from the SWIC's perspective is I think they have a new cybersecurity class for PSAPs. That's actually a webinar. And one of the benefits of a class like that is that if we coordinate it well enough with, say, the board and our committees and the 911 council, if we are able and agree, or if we agree to that class, that it would be good to have and can establish some of the details soon enough, we could possibly get it coordinated such that we could maybe get all 113 PSAPs on the same webinar. Then that way they would all get the benefit of having that training, which, you know, cybersecurity is a moving target now, so you always have to stay current with that. So that's something that we're looking at fairly heavily. The other thing that was discussed was Cedar Rapids Fire District Chief Walzer was able to attend a COMEL boot camp in Tennessee. I believe he's here with us today. And Chief Walzer, if you wouldn't mind giving us a brief synopsis of kind of what you saw when you were down there and what you learned and maybe what we could take and apply here would be excellent.
Good morning. Yeah, back in August, did attend the Tennessee. It was a state of Tennessee week that they had set aside for a COMEX, and then day one was a one-day boot camp. Just real quick, in the state of Tennessee, they actually certify all of their COMELs, so they issue them a hard-printed credential, and they require this boot camp once every 3 or 4 years in order to maintain your certification. They certify them at 3 levels. One, I believe, was agency specific. So if you only wanted to be a COMEL for your agency, that would be all you'd be potentially asked to perform. The next level was at a local or county level, and then I believe they called the top tier regional, and that covered they could go anywhere in the state then. And then so they had the different categories of people that are ready to perform in the event that it's necessary. As part of the process, I was actually able to get certified in the state of Tennessee as a regional COML. So now I have my little card at home on my desk. I don't believe I'll be responding there anytime soon, but they did let me go through their entire process basically. And so it was a review of the ICS forms that the comms unit would use. It was a review, kind of an update, if you will, on the status of things like FirstNet, their statewide system, some of the changes to local systems that they would encounter. They had a couple of scenarios, scenario-based, so you had to actually create the ICS 205 forms, et cetera. And then in addition to that piece then was preparation for their COMEX the next day. And their COMEX, this was the first time their military had put on this communication exercise. So it was a little more of a COMEL rodeo, if you will. So kind of a meet and greet, bring your tools, bring your equipment, participate if you like. They didn't have a really set measle of what were they trying to accomplish, but their goal is to evolve as time goes on. So they shared their one-day COMEL boot camp curriculum with me. They sent it to me, and so we can kind of look at that, see how it might work for Iowa. They have a significantly higher number, just raw number of available COMELs. I want to say it was over 100, 118, 120. They gave some breakdowns. We obviously don't have quite that cadre built up yet. So obviously, whatever we implement, there's a fine line between verifying your ability to perform, but then also we don't want to eliminate too many people from the list. And part of the reason we live in Iowa, of course, is fairly low on natural disasters, and sometimes having that opportunity to work and actually perform the role is difficult. So I'm not exactly sure how that'll look for Iowa. I mean, I have my opinions, but I think we need to kind of toss it around as a committee and find out what we believe are the next steps, if there's anything to be learned from it. But they were very accepting of out-of-state folks. They invited us to bring any equipment we wanted to bring, any of us that wanted to participate, and it was really a good experience to see kind of how they end-to-end how they run their program. Any questions? All right.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Wally. And then one last item too. We were able to get Chief Walzer signed up to attend, I believe it's the Charlie version of the ITSL course that's being offered. Is it December, Wally? Yes, it's in December. That's on OEC Invitational Travel. The ITSL is the Information Technology Service Leader. They're looking at adding that to NIMS and the COMU. So our hope is that we can start to get our hands on this as kind of the communications necessary during emergency scenarios or planned events, changes, and there's a heavier focus on data long term. You know, hopefully we can get ourselves in a spot where we can start positioning personnel, resources, strategies, so that we're ready to operate effectively in this new world that we're in with things like FirstNet and public safety broadband. Otherwise, that's the report.
All right, thank you. Moving on to technology. Chair Updike, are you still on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Go right ahead.
The Technology Committee just met once this past month due to my workload going on down here at Corrections. So the Technology Committee was presented with a standards draft document from Twick Myers that looks into the capabilities of connecting smart devices, if you will, smartphones, tablets, into the Isicsb system. It's a very lengthy discussion. We spent the full 2 hours just talking about it. We still have a lot more work to do. So we're just trying to get through some of the wording. I'm sure Chris will socialize that more. I don't know if he would like to expand upon that a little bit, but a rather short report, but lots to talk about it. Chris, do you want to expand upon that a little bit?
More or less, you kind of covered it to the extent that it probably needed to right now, but we are expecting that there will be potential request and benefit from, say, agency supervisors or command level staff that may have a desire to use like a smartphone with an application that can interface with Isics to keep tabs on operations that may be going on at home, or some other type of need case. Something like this would also probably eventually involve the operations committee as well. But as far as the technical side goes, that's what the technology committee is investigating at this point.
What kind of software and or device were you talking about? Because there is one that works on, which
Yep.
every vendor has one. You have
Yep.
Beyond, you have Wave.
Yep. This was
It's
focused
not
around.
as simple as we
Yeah.
portray it to be. There's
Exactly.
issues, that
And-
unintended consequences that come with that.
Yep.
So
And that's something that the technology committee was looking at as far as, would something like this possibly be, a heavier lift technologically than what people are expecting? And if it is a heavier technological lift than what people are expecting, are there associated costs as far as procurement of equipment, licensing, maintenance items, and then anything else associated with it as well? The use case was kind of thought to be, the traveling commander with a smartphone that may use an application like Wave, or there's also been some discussion of FirstNet and AT&T's Kodiak application interfacing with various P25 systems. I'm assuming that there'll be something similar coming out with Verizon and any other offering of public safety broadband, and then also a desktop client perhaps as well. So
I would highly encourage you to get with the engineers with Motorola before you went any further for the repercussions before you talk through it. You may be working on something that's not going to happen.
Yep, we are aware.
Right, let's get like we say, let's get the car running. Let's drive it. Before we start adding the stuff, let's get the basics down. So if there's other stuff you can be working on that's more of a priority, that would be good.
And the current form of the text has been sent to the engineers as well at Motorola for their review and
Maybe
feedback.
Melvin can expand on that when he comes up here, but it's not as easy as we think it is.
Just a quick comment or question on that. I'm curious. It's at the interop level that we're looking at that option, because it would seem to me that if there are agencies or leaders that are wanting to participate with a smartphone computer device, it would more often be at that operable level.
So we were kind of trying to look holistically and globally with it as well. So technological aspects of both sides. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're moving on to other reports, information sharing. Does anybody have anything like to share? I do, and I'll address your question with Leah. I'm glad you brought that up. So there's several parts to this. First of all and foremost is DPS or the state will not shut anything off or not use the services our towers provide, or cut the phone lines, flip the switch, however you want to say it, before there's heavy involvement, heavy communication with our sheriff partners, our police, or EMS fire that all use it. It is a big deal. Everybody's been using it since the 70s. And I stated a few board meetings ago, and I think Sheriff Rotter was interested in definitely being on that LEA committee, and that's my intent. But the reason we haven't really done anything with it, there really hasn't been any movement on it. First of all, I want to make everybody aware, and you can tell your entities that you represent that there will be nothing that will happen until there's a full communication on it and a progression towards that day. But what you should know is when the system does go live, at our PSAP level, when I'm talking DPS communication centers, we will patch in, Motorola's provided the gateways as part of the contract, LEA into anything we need to, such as the pursuits or the regionals or whatever at the council level, which will carry over. And then it won't necessarily be a permanent patch, but it will patch in as necessary. Boots on the ground people can still use their LEA as they normally do, talking to their PSAP. The troopers can still use it. Anybody that has LEA, we can still do that. But at our level, we can certainly get it into the system if need be. And then eventually, when we're confident, and thus the reason for the control stations, when this board is confident and the committee that works on the LEA, if you want to put it, what's the word you use for when you put something on sunset, wherever we want to use, that committee will make that and we'll present it to the board, and then that timeline will start. based on those recommendations. And so you can tell your entities that that's going to be happening. I'm going to be hiring an assistant system administrator. That person is in background as we speak. When that background comes back, the intent of the main focus for the first year at least is this person that we have to background is heavy involvement in working with telcos and all the ones that working on cutovers, got a heavy background in engineering on just what we're going to be doing. Sunsetting things, rolling things, cutting things over. That will be her goal, to work with the committee based on their recommendations to get with the telcos, get with DPS and look at all the service providers that serve those tower sites and how we get that cut over. So it's a heavy lift, but it will be a very heavy communication between the committee, this board, and all the people that are affected by LEA. So that fear should be put to rest. It is a difficult thing to keep moving. I will tell you that we still have the circuits are down. So that's the reason for we just need to move on when we have a brand new network waiting for it. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time to get that off. But that's why the control stations are very important, that we ensure that we have at least the basics to access the system in some way, shape, or form. And then let the PSAP expand on that however they want, but at least we get them on the system somehow. So that's that piece. The other piece, I'll just update you, we're continuing our DPS training. We've been into it about 5 weeks. So we have a training team that goes around to all our districts, and we train the troopers and the agents on how to use the radio system and their portables and their mobiles. That's internal, how to use the talk groups, and how to use the repeater, the vehicular repeater, what the regional talk groups are about. They show on board policy on how the pursuits work. So we're doing that. So when we start using it, that they will know that they're not going to use DPS base anymore to go to work. They'll be using the calling channel and then be using a law channel for their be assigned by dispatch for their day-to-day work. So. Any questions for me on DPS matters or troopers or agents, or I can answer what I can.
Tom, this is Patrick.
Yeah.
What is the future plan for VLAW 31 and point-to-point at those locations that have those systems in place?
They'll stay. I have no intentions of even entertaining doing anything with those. It'll stay as a simplex. A point-to-point will stay in the PSAP. That's theirs anyway. The biggest one is the LEA. I think you'll maybe see point-to-point maybe continue to be used for a while, and it can stay. But then I think once we get on the system and use it for a few years, I think you'll start using those regionals and the statewides on the system versus the point-to-point VHF. Mutual aid will stay.
Right, okay. I've just been getting some questions about it, so.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet. Anything else? Okay, we'll bring up the project manager for Motorola. Melvin, if you'd like to join us here.
Good morning. All right, is it visible? Can you guys see it?
Yep.
Okay, so as mentioned before, there's a lot of red here, red being good, so the focus is what remains to be done. And this overall map is really just there's just 4 areas to focus on. So we have up here the Hardin site, which is unique in that it's powered. We're still working on it, but it's powered and the microwave is already up and running, linking all the sites up in the north. The reason I show it as power and yet still active, because we still have some things to do. We got to build the fence and we got to do some other stuff that are specific to the needs of the neighbors in that area. So, but the site itself has the power, and we've gotten the microwave working, so there's just more work to be done, but overall, it's actually an active site. And then over here we have, this was the last remaining lease site that we had, that we're trying to get rolling on, and that's rolling. Actually, we have some activity starting, but again, that was pretty much the only one that didn't have power at the time, and we're still working on that. All the others, everything that was green is red, and we have one site down here that is actually billed, but it's just, again, waiting for power for that particular site. And then up north, we have the Rock Rapids site, which hadn't started yet, and we're actually about to start next week.
You're about to get snowed on.
Yes, yes. Wear boots and heavy clothing. All right, so these are the sites of interest. Again, Rock Rapids, Calhoun, Hardin, and Keosauqua. Again, what's going on in Keosauqua, it's a specific need for the power company down there. So we had to order a specific transformer that needed to be installed in order to split the power there. My understanding in talking with our sub is that that's come in, and we're looking at doing this work next week. Okay, so here's proof that the Hardin Tower really is there with the shelter. So again, this has always been a challenging site. It's in the top of a hill, so it was a lot of work to get all this stuff up there. There's a lot of sensitivities. So we're working with locals there to make sure that we address all the concerns and the additional risks and whatnot. But like I said, the site is there. You can see the dish is there. The site is powered, so we're using it. So when we come to the summary table, the numbers keep on getting smaller and smaller. So the one site that's not started, again, is in Region 3, which is a Rock Rapids site. The two civils that are active, that's the Hardin site and the Calhoun site. And then the one that we're waiting for power is the Keosauqua site down south. For coverage testing, all of these counties identified in green have been coverage tested already. Including down here, what I showed here, this is Polk County, so that's the capital area. Just had to show it a little bit different there. So we've come to a halt, and I'll explain that in a little bit, but basically all of these sites that are gray will be coming up pretty soon. All these counties will be ready for testing pretty soon, with the exception of this one, these four, which I'll explain in a moment. So right now we're at 99.3% success rate. We've tested about 50,000 tiles. 5% failure. If we were allowed 5% failure, which is the math, we'd be at about 2,500 tiles failed. We've only failed 300 tiles. So far we're pretty good shape. And again, the tiles that failed have been pretty much where we expected them to, because we're not making any distinction. We're testing wherever we can drive, basically. So we're not saying if we don't show coverage, we don't drive it. We still drive it as long as there's a road that we can get through. Okay, so going back to the overalls, I wanted to show, as I show in the previous slide, all the gray areas. So I wanted to focus on the gray area so you can understand what's driving that. So in the middle, here's one of the gray areas. What I wanted you to notice is that the reason we haven't tested all of that there is because of the Hardin site and the KTIN Fort Dodge site. So two sites is preventing us from testing all of those counties. And again, it's not because these sites are critical to all of the counties, but these sites provide coverage to adjacent counties as well. So even though there might be a primary site somewhere else, But when we do our drive testing, we test in the counties and we look for all of the adjacent sites that support that county. So in some cases it's 6, in some cases it's 2, and everything else in between. Up there in the northwest, again, it's just the Rock Rapids site. Doesn't mean that there's no coverage on the other 3 counties. There is, but we don't want to test it until we get Rock Rapids, because Rock Rapids also provides overlap in those counties too. In the southwest, again, we got 6 counties, and we haven't tested those just because because of the local enhancement happening in Page County right now. So we had to reconfigure some things down there. We're waiting for that piece to be completed. Once that's completed, then we can test all of the cluster of 6 counties down there. Again, not that there's not coverage, because all of the surrounding sites are active and functional, but we want to make sure that when we look at all the surrounding counties and we say it's 6 sites or 4 sites or whatever it is, we want to make sure that all those sites are active so we can execute the coverage testing. In the southeast, again, it's really just a Keosauqua site. A little bit there, it was Davis as well, but we got power in Davis, so we moved on with Davis. But really just a Keosauqua site. Once you get power with Keosauqua, we'll optimize that site, and we'll be able to test the cluster of 8 sites down there, 8 counties, should I say. And then on the eastern side of the state, it's Dubuque, Scott, and Muscatine. Again, Scott and Muscatine is the replacement of the antennas that we had there. We have them, and we're actually going to be installing them this Saturday, is a plan. So once that happens, that cluster, and then we're working on Dubuque right now. Dubuque is a member of a simulcast cell, so we need to optimize that with the Holy Cross site so that they're both synchronized together. So when you look at this, hopefully this helps clear out that, it's not a big number of sites, but when you look at it and you say, well, gee, that's a lot of counties, why not? It's just a couple of sites can have that impact. Okay. So again, the build continues. The 2 active sites, one to start in the near future, which is the Rock Rapids. We have people going up there next week to start the process. We decided to build a brand new twin tower instead. So that's going to be complicated because it's a TV broadcasting site, so we got to do a lot of coordination, and it's going to be a twin tower, what we call a twin tower, which is a like-for-like replacement. We're going to replace the existing guide tower that they have there today with a duplicate guide tower that can handle all the load and then some. But they're going to be close to each other, so we got to be careful with all the guide wires. So there's definitely a lot of coordination to make this one happen. So this will be a slow one because of all the caution needed and all the coordination needed to make it happen. The microwave paths, we just continue with alignments of those, so that's an ongoing process. All the DPS dispatch centers, we're preparing for cutover. So we did all of the electrical UPS preparations for that, and we've installed 1 operator position in each one of those dispatch centers just to make sure that we're ready and the configuration is correct and whatnot, so that when we're ready, then we go in and just start moving the old computers out, put the new computers in. We're almost complete with the re-optimizing of the 700 megahertz. The only one that remains is the Scott and the Muscatine site, which is really just a replacement of the antennas. Once we do that, we'll be done with rechannelizing of all the sites. The last thing I want to bring to your attention is the wind farms, and I have it here with a red warning sign. we've been aware of the wind farm since we've been working on the project, and a lot of some of our sites we kind of weave our path through the wind farms as well. But the wind farms keep on appearing. So, in particular, I-80, as I'm driving home, all of a sudden those started popping up pretty quickly, and a lot of them, and that was kind of a big concern for me. So we took a look, and we have a site in Brooklyn which connects to the Newton Department of Corrections, and that one is, as you can see here, there's I-80. This is the one that kept me awake at night because I was worried that their wind farms was going to break our path. So we took a look. It took a while to figure out how to get the data, but we have our engineer that knows how to deal with all that, and he was able to pull all the data and find that there was one particular tower that was concerned, which was pretty close to our path. So according to the data, at least it was about 200 feet away from our path. But I was still nervous about that because it's a paper study, and we wanted to go out there and make sure, because depending on the survey and depending on the application, you have a center point where you're going to put the tower, but there can be movement, in some cases as much as 200 feet. So I went out there, and this is a Brooklyn tower, and I stood by the Brooklyn Tower and looked with binoculars that have a little compass built in, so you can see the azimuth and whatnot. And from there, I could see this is a tower that was showing on our paper study that was of concern. Our path actually turns out it goes out in this direction. If you see this little post here, it actually goes in this direction over here, over this building. So we got lucky, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because I believe that the board should be working with the state legislatures, governor's office to figure out a way to protect your investment. Because I'm assuming that the wind farms are going to continue popping up, and the last thing you want is for these things to break your paths.
Can you explain what would happen if, pull up your microwave shots if you would from your first slide. I brought this up maybe 6 months ago as a concern, but I want to see the microwave shots that you have here show our grid. Our network.
Oh, the overall network?
Yeah. That one. Yep. So let's just say, and these wind farms will continue, let's just say they, for some odd reason, they put it in a path. Show the board, I know what will happen, but show the board what the effect is when a path or two paths get broke at any one of these links.
Sure. So in this case, this is the Brooklyn site. This is the Department of Corrections site. This is the path that I was concerned about because the wind farm is basically it becomes in essence about a mile-long wall, if you will. So we need to make sure that if we have to go through one, which we do, like we do for the Hardin site up here. As a matter of fact, that was one of the reasons why the Hardin site was so difficult because even though we work with the property owner, our neighbor, to try to relocate that site, any movement created a problem with the wind farms because we're going right through a wind farm. So in this case, if this path was to be broken, then there's obviously, because we have loops, we go around that to go in different directions or around this way to go in different directions. So one of the things that I'm actually doing is, because I'm concerned about that too, is I'm actually installing another path that goes between these two sites here to provide an added level of protection. So we're going to have a path that goes from, this is Marion to Newton, and then we're also going to go from Hooper to the Madison site. So we're just adding that additional there because I wanted to have another extra sense of protection there just in case. But in essence, what happens is when the paths get broken, because these are microwave loops, we basically just go around in the other direction to make it there.
Does that site go into site trunking then?
No.
If two links get broke?
It all depends on where on the ring.
What's the worst case scenario?
The worst case scenario is that the site goes into site trunking.
So are they required when they build a wind farm, just like we do with frequencies, to see if there's anything in between?
So what I found, and this is what I have down here. So what I found is that some of them do look into the PCNs, but it's not required by law. And so that may explain why they have that near miss. I mean, it was close enough, but not enough to impact us. But we don't know that for sure. So from my perspective, there needs to be work between this body and the legislature to protect that investment. The other part to that is there needs to be some kind of a mechanism for collaboration and beyond that approval, right? So that normally when microwave tower is being built, the neighbors get a letter that says, hey, we're going to build this microwave shot, it's sort of a warning, and you get to look at it and provide some feedback. I don't believe that's being done for the wind farms, and it should, because that way, at least for the Isicsb system, if there was a letter that went to this body, then your technical team can take a look at it and make sure that it's going to be okay. And if it's not, again, at least it gives them the ability to move that, wherever that tower, to move it around to avoid that impact before they actually start building it.
Okay.
So there needs to be law so it has teeth to enforce that, because if it isn't, then there's no guarantee that you're going to get that letter or anything, and you might find in the future that your site is now being affected by it.
So with that being said, what I'd like to do with Jason's help and approval, also your buy-in and the board's buy-in, is to create a subcommittee here to investigate this, chaired by Miss Sandy Black. I think you could probably help us with that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of stuff at this.
Yeah, if you could form a committee for that, and something document that you could present, that we can draft, and that we could present to either for legislation with our senators that are on our board and or the Iowa Utilities Board, to make them aware of our network.
Yeah, I just did a cursory, I'm sorry. Just did a real cursory read. Not working. I just did a real quick cursory review, and in one county in the northwest area of Iowa, they're just, by 2020, they're going to have 121 more built. Alliant Energy is spending $1.8 billion just in that area there alone. And we absolutely need to have some kind of cooperation between us so that they're not messing with our microwave paths.
Would you be willing to chair that group?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think it's very important that we keep our system healthy, for sure. And it's just something you don't think about. Not only is the wind farm, I think the cell tower coming, or you got FirstNet being built, all kinds of stuff's going on here. And I'm assuming the cell companies do microwave shots also if they don't have the backhaul on the ground, right? So, good information. Thank you, Sandy.
That's all I had.
What is the height of the typical microwave? Are cells typically lower than?
Yeah, cell towers tend to be around 180 foot height. Our towers are a lot taller. We're on average between 300 and 400 feet. That's because our microwave shots are long. So the longer the distance, the higher the tower needs to be. So if we were to say, like let's say in California, and they say, well, gee, you know, environmental regulations require that you have to have them no taller than 200 feet, then the amount of towers that you would need would about double. So that's the reason why we have our towers are pretty tall, you know, in comparison.
Yeah, my reason for clarifying that was I think the telcos have a pretty strong lobby, and if we're asking all the phone companies to cooperate, that may be a taller order than if we're just concerned or primarily concerned with the wind towers, which have a greater height and therefore a greater threat to our microwave link.
Right.
Can I make a comment?
The probabilities for a cell tower to interfere with us are a lot smaller because our dishes are a lot higher. But the wind farms, because they basically form a wall, those are the ones that are difficult to deal with.
Our batteries are dying on these. Thank you. He said too. I don't touch that. So I do have a comment on that. Two things. The wind turbines usually run about 325 feet.
Mhm.
And then the thing that we do have in our favor is that if they're causing interference, right, they can't cause interference, even if it's a modulation interference to existing or anybody's systems. It's against FCC rules, so that we will have in our favor. Do you disagree?
Correct, but that would be interference would be with regards to emissions, and in our case is a physical blockage of the path. Now, what helps is that the blades are now mostly fiberglass, which helps. There's a core to it though that it's not, so it kind of depends on, you know, where we hit. I mean, we could probably still go through a path that's blades in it and still be okay. But again, it depends on the specifics of that particular wind farm, how they design the blades and whatnot.
You said earlier that you guys were able to get some information about where they're located.
Correct.
Can you pass that on to us?
Sure.
Thank you.
The only warning is that it took our engineer a couple of days to not just get the information, but to make it somewhat usable for that particular area. It's not nicely organized, so the way it's organized, it's like well, I won't even go through it. It's kind of painful, but I'll make sure that we follow up with you guys and let you know how we found that information.
Great.
All right.
Thank you. AT&T happen to be here today, or any FirstNet representatives on the phone or in the audience? I don't see any AT&T people. How about on the phone? Okay, Jim Lundstedt, OEC.
Good morning. In a former life, I used to keep an eye on wind towers by watching the FAA filings. They are required to file with the FAA, which gives you a window, so there is some advance notice, but that's often just before the steel goes up. So I would encourage, perhaps, Chris, this is something to take to the National Council of SWICs, because Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, and other states have this problem, and it's probably going to only get worse. I mean, despite the fact we're using a carbon fiber blade, it's still a fairly significant obstruction. And it may be worth exploring what the National Weather Service is doing to keep an eye on that as well, because it does obstruct the weather radar. We've had some pretty significant impacts from that as well. So we have a community of interest here that's not just exclusive to microwaves. So perhaps there's an opportunity there. Chris from Denise's report would just add that we're conducting the ICS 300 class next week in Mason City. And the week of November 26th, we're conducting the Tactical Dispatch INTD course at Monticello, and look forward to working with students to get that training completed. Chris mentioned that the OEC catalog is out. One caveat for you is during fiscal year 19, OEC is going to begin introducing some regional classes, and I mean regional meaning multi-state classes for the communications section personnel. We are exploring this as an alternative to some state classes where we're not getting the minimum number of attendees. Under consideration is the possibility of holding a multi-state class and OEC providing invitational travel for attendees to support that. That's new. It's a change in our doctrine and will more to come. Last thing, and this is for the geeks in the group, those of you who use Chasm, we've just enrolled Chasm with a new email address. Chasm is the communications asset and survey module, which helps planning for interoperable communications. The address is chasm, CASM.DHS.gov. So for those of you who have used that for interoperable communications planning, specifically frequencies, sites, and assets, the new address, chasm.dhs.gov. That's all I have, sir. Any questions for me?
Thank you. Okay, move on to Standards Working Group. I believe Chris is doing that as well.
Yeah.
I appreciate you jumping on all these calls because it really helps out.
Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate the positive feedback. So standards met last month. They sent 5 standards to governance for review, of those 4 of which are here. We have another list of standards ready to go for next month. Those would include that one that governance asked the verbiage be redone a little bit on it. So that's on the agenda along with, I think, 9 others. We're to the point now, and we've been saying this for a couple months now, where as we look globally across the Midwest and what other states have done, we're starting to get to the point where we can say, what state, Minnesota or Ohio or Missouri is doing doesn't necessarily apply to us. We don't need to worry about that aspect of this type of thing just yet, or ever for that matter. So we are making progress, very, very steady progress, and I think we are in a very good position for when the system is turned on. That next standards meeting, if anybody is interested in attending, is November 27th, and that is in a Dell, just north of town at the Dallas County Public Health Center, I think is what it's called. It's just off of Highway 169. We are looking for participation from anybody that has an interest in something like this. So please swing on by if you want to see how things are done and how these standards are derived.
Okay, thank you. There's no old business. We're moving on to new business, which is the user group Chair Buffington. Looks like we have 4 to approve today. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, the user group committee has reviewed and recommended for approval as I'd mentioned earlier, Delaware, Dubuque, Jackson County Regional Transit Authority at level 2, Hancock County at level 3, Jones County at level 1, the United States Army Corps of Engineers Lake Red Rock, an update to move them up to level 2. Due to my employment as employee of Hancock County, I will not be making any motion to approve that, and I will be abstaining from any vote.
I'll just take a motion to approve all 4 from somebody if they would like to make that motion.
I'll make it.
Hey, Sandy, do you have a second?
Second.
Dave Ness. Any further discussion? Do I have a motion and a second for Delaware, Hancock, Jones, and U.S. Army of Corps? Do I have all in favor? Sorry.
Aye.
Aye. Jeez, getting tongue-tied here. We need to. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that motion passes. The next set is the standards group. Governance Chair Benson is not here. I believe who is handling the?
So. For the board today, we have 4 standards for approval. These have gone through standards and governance. They are a standard for Public Safety Communications Center interoperability, standard for system tech talk group, a standard for the use of shared talk groups, and a standard for status message transmission. We would need a motion and a second to approve these, or there's also room for discussion as well.
I've got a discussion point on the first one. In reading through it, there's one reference in here. I'll read what it says. It says, and Isicsb radio control stations were provided to PSAPs through the Homeland Security Grant Program, comma. My suggestion, maybe it doesn't have to be done here. We can maybe go back and address it with the committee to possibly amend that to say, for instance, the control station was made available to qualifying PSAPs. So there's not a reference saying that every PSAP got one. They were made available to the qualifying ones. And maybe we could amend this in the future if the committee wishes to do so.
Did they have to qualify, or aren't they being sent to, the first choice is those who applied for them, and secondly, those who didn't are also receiving. Is that the way I understand it?
Correct.
So we don't need the change. It's not necessary to have that change in there that Larry's suggesting. Because we're going to be provided.
So the criteria. No, I'm struggling with this. So the criteria on the program that the grant program that this kind of references here was an active connection by November 1st of this year. I think that's what Mr. Smith is referencing with the qualifying PSAP aspect. So that's where that clarification lies. There's certainly a grammatical thing with regards to plural versus singular nouns and verbs associated with that could be tidied up.
I don't have any issue with sending it back. I do have one concern also that I'll bring up while we have this. Under constraints, I read it as Isicsb radio control stations used to connect to the Isicsb platform are limited to one talk group for active monitoring for each radio control station. If I read that, the way I'm reading, I could be wrong, is that you're locked on one channel. You can hear nothing but what you're locked on. But it does scan everything because we're loading them up with everything. You can scan, you can turn scan on, but a control station is limited to one to talk on each time. This basically saying that it's not scannable. Am I inaccurate? The only constraint is you have to have a control station for each one you're talking on. If you want to talk on region 1 and I want to talk on region 1, we can't do it until you're done talking.
Chris, I wasn't at the meeting, as you're aware. I'm not aware of any sense of urgency on this standard in particular. So I might make a motion to approve 2 through 4 and send 1 back for clarification. Does that meet your desire, Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mine as well.
Seems reasonable.
We have a motion to approve standards 2 through 4. Do I have a second?
Second.
Burgos, second.
Second, Jason. Any further discussion? All in favor? I'll do it again. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. If anybody would like to approach the podium, you're welcome to do so. Or anybody on the phone can voice their opinion as well. Okay, hearing none, let's move on to adjournment. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Sandy, second?
Larry Smith.
Larry. We're adjourned. Thank you.